And yeah, welcome to our webinar. So, like I mentioned to some of you already, today we'll just talk about delivering a course online, and I'll just give you some tips and tricks on some potentially useful tools that you can use in delivering a course, and also a little bit about the structure of it. I see somebody else joining. Hi, Ahsan.
Hi, how are you?
Good. We're just getting started.
Yeah, sure.
So, for those of you who aren't familiar with what we do, we're a company called InChange, based in the Netherlands, and actually we design training software for supply chain management professionals and educators. And currently we have 3 simulations. The Fresh Connection, which I think some of you are familiar with. This is really based on supply chain management best practices. The Cool Connection, focusing on working capital, supply chain finance, and IBP. And the Blue Connection, which is a circular strategy simulation. But all of these 3 are actually united under one umbrella of fostering team skills, interdepartmental or uh, interdepartmental alignment, and also alignment within a team, and of course also trying to bring real life experience as a way of educating supply chain talent. And because oftentimes we deliver our trainings online, so we've sort of accumulated quite a lot of knowledge on delivering online courses, and that's what I'll be sharing with everyone today. Just 1 second, let me let another participant in. Hi, Vasco.
How are you?
Hi, good. We're
Hi,
just getting started.
Thank you.
So obviously with Corona spreading, all the public institutions had to be shut down, or at least we weren't allowed to work from the offices or homes, and that, of course, has some impact on education, and we need to safeguard the quality of education, because it would be unreasonable to just stop teaching students for a semester or 2 semesters. It would really delay them. And what was some of the biggest challenges we've seen is that, of course, the rapid switch. So in general, I think universities weren't prepared to switch so quickly. So that was challenging. And of course, also maintaining the quality of education as students switch to online classroom. And so the goal of today is not only talk about how to deliver the content online, but really how to deliver it without losing the quality of teaching. So a few things we'll focus on today is the synchronous versus asynchronous mode of learning. We'll also talk about learning management systems. We'll talk about the best practices of hosting live classes and tutorials. Also discuss how to leverage the use of discussion forums and live chats. And we will also briefly touch upon students working in virtual teams. So there are 2 types of learning when it comes to online learning. There's synchronous and asynchronous learning. So we'll talk about the pros and cons and what they are. And synchronous learning is learning that happens in real time. So basically what we're doing right now is an example of synchronous learning, because we're all online and it's happening in real time, which also gives you an opportunity to interact with students in real time. And then you can use several different online platforms, for example, Microsoft Teams. And the pros of synchronous learning is that you have a high level of engagement because you can really talk to the students directly, receive questions, exchange ideas, and nurture discussion among students. It's also more dynamic in a way that it feels more real time, basically. And another important factor, another pro of synchronous learning is that you receive immediate feedback from them, and they also receive an immediate feedback from you. So in case they ask you a question, for example, and you answer them, you can right away see if that's enough of an answer for them to understand, or if they want to dive deeper into it. And of course, in some cases, if it's really a discussion, it's much easier to do it in real time versus doing it via email, for example. But there are some disadvantages, of course, of synchronous learning. Um, Technical difficulties is a major one. For example, sometimes, especially with everyone working from home, the internet the broad width of the internet doesn't allow for video conferencing, for example, or on certain laptops or within certain areas, certain online tools might not be available, or something goes wrong. So technical difficulty is definitely a thing to consider when choosing to go for synchronous learning. And of course, it's also less flexible. So that choosing to go completely with synchronous learning or synchronous teaching means that you or the students do not have the flexibility to structure their day. They have to be online in certain hours and be engaged in the lecture. And also, of course, if you it's difficult to keep somebody engaged for more than an hour sitting in front of their computer looking at a live stream or webinar or a tutorial. And some of the ideas on how to facilitate synchronous learning. So it can be done via live webinars. So what we're doing right now, you can also, of course, you broadcast your lecture. You can also do just face-to-face video conferencing if it's more of a tutorial with a discussion versus you presenting materials to them. And it's also possible to do it via live chats or instant messaging. So, for example, if there is just a discussion going on, you can have students go online and use a live chat to discuss a certain topic or an issue, and you can stir that discussion and leave comments. And so asynchronous learning is when students learn on their own by studying the provided materials. And what essentially happens is usually there is a time frame in which they need to complete it, but when and how they do it is, of course, up to them completely. And the advantage of that is, of course, it's flexibility. So everybody has their own rhythm. So some people like to stay up all night and work, and some people are early risers. And it's also then they can focus when they are able to focus. Another advantage is pacing. So some people understand certain things quickly, and others need to dive into it deeper. And that's why they can go at their own pace and read it several times or watch a recorded lecture several times if they need to understand it or take notes and refer back to it. And it's also because all the materials are essentially streamed or downloaded, there's always a possibility to review and revise these materials in a later stage when a question comes up. But the disadvantage of it is, of course, lower engagement. So because they don't have to be following a schedule or they don't have to be engaging with other people, so there is less pressure to engage and not procrastinate. And I think also an important disadvantage to consider, especially in the times of quarantine and lockdown, is the isolation. So people are already quite isolated from each other these days. And if you also go for completely asynchronous mode, then they don't get to interact with their peers at all. And asynchronous learning, sorry, there's a typo there, can happen via online learning path. So, for example, if your university is learning management system allows to design a learning path where they can follow and read stuff and answer questions. That's an option. Another, which is quite widely used option, is to record lectures and webinars and share it with the students so they can watch it at their convenience and then do assignments or write reports or do something with that knowledge. Of course, emailing plays a big part in asynchronous learning. So all of the questions that students would get and you would normally answer in class or in a live session online, they will normally send it by email. So there's a slower feedback loop there. And a really nice thing to use for asynchronous learning is the discussion forums, is where, because you can, we'll talk more about discussion forums in a bit, but discussion forums is a great way to engage students and have them interact with each other while completing an asynchronous learning module. But obviously, synchronous and asynchronous teaching modes have their advantages and disadvantages. So it's actually better to try and combine the two in your course. That seems to be more effective. And the best practice from our experience is to deliver live online sessions 2-3 times a day, about 30 to 45 minutes each. And that's, of course, if you're doing an intense course. And the reason the session should be not more than 45 minutes is because it's the attention span, I think, even in physical on-site lectures, is not more than 45 minutes to an hour. But now imagine just sitting on a screen. So it's nice to keep it short, but just do it several times a day as a check-in also to see if more questions come up while they're working independently and such. Of course, as I mentioned, make use of discussion forums as a way to have them interact, but also answer questions and reflect on certain concepts that you introduce. It's nice to hand out materials to students ahead of time. So, for example, ahead of a live session, so they can be more familiar with it before you introduce it in the live session. Just because they have a chance to, come up with questions and get them answered right away, versus, having them email you about it later. And it's also a possibility to consider having students to work in teams. So as a whole class, you have synchronous live sessions 2-3 times a day, but then you can group them in teams and have them work together to combat that sort of lack of lower engagement and isolation disadvantage of asynchronous learning. But the only thing to watch out for when it comes to students working in teams is that there might be some free riders, so to speak. Now let's briefly touch on learning management system. I don't know, for those of you who teach at universities, do any of you use learning management systems such as Blackboard or Canvas? Or if you use anything else?
Yeah, we got Blackboard here in Curtin, Australia.
Yeah, anybody else?
Yeah, we used to, when I was teaching, we used to use Blackboard as well.
Yeah, I think I think Blackboard is one of the most predominant one these days, I think. But for those of you who haven't used learning management system, it's basically a system that allows you to share course content in many media formats and also in a structured way. So, for example, you can have a separate link for a discussion forum with a different question where students can discuss certain things. You can also share all your reading materials in one folder, even per week, for example. So you can also share them ahead of time. You can share your pre-recorded lectures there, answer questions, and even actually accept submitted assignments and provide grading there as well. And I think basically one of the big advantages of using a learning management system is because it saves you the time on sending out materials to all the students. So you can just upload everything at once, structure it, and it also helps students to go with the learning path. So if they have their assignments mapped out for them, and you have the lectures and classes pre-recorded on, for example, Blackboard for each week, then each student is free to work their way through it. But of course, you can also choose when you publish the materials if you want to everybody to stay in the same week. And so, as I mentioned, some of the commonly used learning management systems are Blackboard, Canvas, and Moodle. So about live online classrooms, live sessions, live tutorials, depending on what you do exactly. It's important to choose a platform that really fits. For example, I know that some universities use Zoom and it's available to everybody, or some universities provide the Microsoft Teams package or Microsoft package to all the students by default. So really choose the platform that is the most accessible to everybody to avoid any problems of people not being able to access it, for example. And also consider if you want to use, so Zoom, for example, has functionality for breakout rooms. So if you're just broadcasting the material to them or having a lecture, then Microsoft Teams, for example, will do the trick. But if you have also, if right now we have a relatively small group, so we can easily just start a discussion here in one chat room, so to speak, and without hindering each other. But if you have a class of 20 or more people on Zoom, then it's nice to use breakout rooms where they can discuss topics in smaller group, and you can move from one room to another. So that's why choosing a platform is quite crucial. What is also important is to test the connection before you start, and check if the internet is, everything is working, especially the sound quality, and check if, so I always advise to wear a headset or use a microphone for it instead of just speaking into the computer itself. And it's nice to get it tested about 10-20 minutes before you have to deliver the class, just so you can have enough time to troubleshoot any issues that you might have. Especially with large groups, it's nice to mute the participants when they don't need to talk, because otherwise, if some participants aren't wearing a headset, you'll hear a lot of background noise, or you will hear yourself talking. And with a large group, it can be quite an issue that will hinder you from delivering the content effectively. If if you have see a lot of questions come up as you're going through the material, it's nice to encourage your students to put the questions in a chat and have the chat open, so you can keep track of the questions and answer them as they become more relevant, or if you feel like it's an important question, to stop right there, and that way people don't start just talking over you and interrupt the flow of the class. And some tips for keeping students more engaged. So rather than them just sitting and listening to the materials, it's nice to use Kahoot, for example. So you can always, in your lecture or class, put a few questions after every unit or after a few slides. You can put a quiz question and give them access to a Kahoot room where they can answer the question, and then you will see the results presented in polls. And it's just a fun way to also test if they're understanding the material, but also keep them more on their toes so they don't relax or start browsing the internet or something while they're watching the lecture. And actually Zoom also, so the Zoom's webinar version allows you to have polls where students can do the same while in the call without having to use Kahoot as a third-party provider. And regarding the tools, so I already mentioned Zoom and Microsoft Teams. Of course, there is also Google Hangouts, which sometimes could be slightly more accessible than Microsoft Teams. But in general, I think Zoom and Microsoft Teams are the more widely used tools. So now onto discussion forums and live chats. I don't know if any of you have already ran a course since Corona started online. Just wanted to see if anybody has used discussion threads either now with online learning or even before, when the learning was still face-to-face.
No.
So, excuse me. So what we noticed actually is that it's a nice way to engage students by creating several discussion points on the topic and posting them on a. You can use several different platforms for it, of course. Like I said, Blackboard probably would be, or learning management system would be a good place to put it. But also, if your university, for example, doesn't, or your organization doesn't have a learning management system, you can go as far as just creating a private community page on Facebook and posting the questions there, and people can comment. And it's nice because it's engaging, and you can also keep track of participation. So especially in asynchronous learning, where you don't see who is joining or not joining your live tutorials or lectures, you can see who commented. So you can make it part of an assignment, for example, that they have to comment on the discussion thread and leave their opinion or reflection on their discussion point. And they can do so also in teams or individually. And a nice thing is that allows students to interact. So if you have a subject where it's really valuable to have a discussion and not just do exercises and listen to the lecture, then it's a nice outlet for students to share opinions and give their perspective. Another thing to consider for an online course is having a live chat. And that's also, again, to increase engagement, of course. And that can be done, for example, in a way that you can host a lecture or a class, and then you can have the live chat open for the next hour, for example, where they can submit their questions and you would answer them. Or even if you are doing all of your classes and lectures pre-recorded, you can just say that from this time to that time during the day, the live chat will be open, and you can come in and ask me questions, and everybody can interact. And the advantage of using a live chat to answer questions to students rather than email is because it really helps you to avoid answering the same question repeatedly, because students they get to see the answers to the questions you already provided. And then, of course, they can also help each other sometimes. And again, it fosters communication among students and gives them an outlet to talk and discuss assignments and projects. Regarding the tools for this, I think Microsoft Teams could really work for that. If everybody is using Microsoft Teams in the organization or university, that's perfect. So everybody in the same course can be in one team and they can discuss it. Slack is also nice. Slack also has a free version. And with Slack, you can also even try to facilitate discussion forums on Slack, because Slack allows you to have channels or different chats per topic. So that's something that can be used. And it's also possible to go to for example, Chatango on if you look it up on Google, and there you can create your own private chat room, and all you have to do is just send people the link or the code to it, and they can access it. And I believe you can open and close it as well, if you want to. Are there any questions so far? Then let's move on to virtual teams. So virtual teams is really reflective of real life business world, because especially in supply chain management, it's a lot of people working from different continents, on different countries, but they still have to work together in a team. So all of their communication is virtual, and with all the troubles that Corona brought us and moving to online education, this is also an opportunity for your students to experience what it is like to working in virtual teams, but also under time pressure. And yeah, like as I mentioned, this is what the global value chain is like in real life, and they need to deal with time differences, sometimes pressure, getting themselves organized, scheduling meetings, and it's also a nice way to deal with isolation, because then at least once or twice a day or a couple times a week they get to interact with somebody, by video conferencing and not just by texting or reading or writing emails. One thing to note though is if you do have your students working in virtual teams, they would usually require more time to complete a task or an assignment, just because of all the organizational hustle and coordinating with each other that comes with a virtual team. And here on the right, you see Belbin team roles, and it's also could be an idea for you to use an evaluation based on these Belbin team roles to teach students some soft skills um, that come from working in a virtual team. Or also, you can also do a questionnaire about the soft skills they acquired by working together online. And actually, with the Fresh Connection online course option that we have, it's also possible. We have an integrated Melbourne role evaluation there. So now a bit about experiential learning and serious gaming and its impact on education in general, but I think especially online, because I think delivering content online can be quite difficult. And experiential learning and serious gaming can really enhance the learning effect. So if you see that listening is actually really contributes to only 10% of learning or understanding the material, and then seeing is a bit more effective, around 25%. Although that would, of course, depend if you are a visual person or if you like to just listen. But actually experiencing something is way more powerful, and that goes up to 80% of 80% is the learning effect is 80% more effective if students learn by experience, and that's where serious gaming comes in, or business simulations. Is that if they learn by doing, then they remember it better, and in serious games they get to apply their theory knowledge into practice. And if you look at the learning cycle, that actually explains how the experience turns into knowledge, because at first they experience something by doing, and then they fail or do well, and regardless, but they reflect on why they failed or did well. They try to conceptualize it and create a sort of a model that they can use for in the future, and then they apply it again to the same situation, for example, and then they experience changes and improves, and they can learn more, and eventually they can apply this knowledge they got from experience elsewhere. So, as I mentioned to some of you already, we do have several options for supply chain management courses. So, of course, we have a fully complete package for an online course where you can start at any time with minimum preparation for it. So, for those of you, if you need to switch online to an online course quickly, still. Of course, we offer blended learning where students can learn in the classroom and at home, or synchronously and asynchronously. And if of course it's also possible to use the simulations in face-to-face classrooms when they become open again. And specifically about the delivering the Fresh Connection online, we do have a online delivery guide bundle, which includes all of the video materials to get students started playing, all the materials needed for reflection, assignments, exercises, and even a sample syllabus with some ideas for examination. So for those of you interested, you can always reach out to me or my colleague Noah, and we'll be able to either schedule a call to discuss this in more detail, how you can use the online bundle, or just share a video that we have about the online bundle. Yeah, are there any questions? If anybody wants to share their experience with taking their course online, there's also an option. Yeah, I'll be silent for a few minutes if you have some questions that I can answer, or if you want to exchange some ideas between you.
Another nice concept to use is the whiteboard. I don't know if you mentioned it, Kirill, but also Microsoft Teams, for example, also has this option. Zoom has it, most have it. So it's a nice one to ask for engagement. Also, if you have many people in your webinar, you can always open up the whiteboard, and then people can share their thoughts or introduce themselves to make a round of introduction. It's always nice to bring these aspects in between your own webinar, so that people are not listening all the time, but also interacting with your material and proactively working with you.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we'll stay on for a few more minutes if anybody has questions. Otherwise, as I mentioned, we're always reachable via email or phone as well. So
I think it's very good content that you shared. Many learning organization is still in transition period, and they're still trying out different softwares. So yeah, I think every software got pros and cons. And like for our organization, we're using Microsoft Teams, which is more efficient compared to we were using before Skype, I would say. So yeah.
But did you use Skype for business or just regular Skype?
Skype for business, like for our workplace before the COVID-19. And after the COVID-19, they did the test and trial for Microsoft Teams, and it works out pretty well in terms of like smoothness of sharing the screen, video, and then because we are like obviously like, it's a big organization, but we got like teams. So like I got 10 people in our team, so we have like every day a meeting, so I can see the difference between compared to Skype. So yeah, and for other stuff, let's say like for personal meetings or like some other volunteer stuff, we normally use Zoom. So every software is doing pretty well at this time, but yeah, it's still in transition in terms of the learning and teaching point of view. Because I did the online MIT courses before through edX, and it was not like this interactive the way now it's required, because it's everything is now moved to online. But before it was like more of like recorded lectures, and you can have a discussion forum, offline discussion forum, and then someone can come back and give you the answer like after a couple of hours, a few days. But yeah, I think since face-to-face teaching is moving to online, so these softwares has a role to play. And yeah, the content is good, I would suggest. Thanks for sharing.
Oh, of course. And just maybe another note on Teams versus Zoom. I think Zoom is excellent for one-off meetings or something irregular, but I think Teams, because you maintain everybody, so you can keep chatting with the same people who are in a call with you, or you can, if you already have a preset team, you can always go back to it and schedule another call. So that's why I think for regular classes and such, Teams is quite an excellent tool to use.
Agree. I'm not sure, like right now my team is like registered to my official work account, and if I want to set up like a meeting through this outside organization, it doesn't allows me, but I can accept yours meeting. So do you have any idea like how does it work? Because I've tried to set up a meeting outside my organization. It doesn't shows me the contact details or email IDs I try to invite. So
Yeah, I think with Teams. So if you have your Office package that comes through your university or your organization, then everything you do is then attached to that email address. And then if you try to, of course, it's also possible to use the web version of it. And with the web version, you can go online, but there it's anonymous. So sometimes you don't see who's actually logging in, but everybody with a link can join. So I think if you try opening it with like putting it into incognito mode, then you'll be able to go into Teams without your organization account.
okay, yeah, because I try to like connect to my mobile. Mobile has a work ID, and try to log in through the link. It didn't work. Then I have to go on my laptop and do it online, and then select the mode of like to go to switch on the like app. But I agree. I think it's not, if maybe like if you send the invitation to my work ID, maybe it work. But if it's to my personal ID, it didn't work.
Yeah, it could be. But also Teams is what I noticed is also Teams is quite exclusive. It works much better if you're in the same organization. Because, for example, if I have a call internally with colleagues, then all of us are allowed to enter. But this time, since everybody is external, I have to allow people to join the meeting. So there's some extra security measures, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. That's the good thing about Teams, maybe. We can have better control.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, any feedback or comments from anybody else?
Yes. Yes, hi, it's Muhammad. Hi, Kirill. Hi, Noah.
Hi.
I have a small clarification that I need to make. Tutoring or it's one-way communication with the class. So also it requires minimal interaction online. It's being very, very difficult to provide it. My question is how things are going on the online simulation game that interaction is necessary. So how difficult it is, how different it is, how effective is the online training, like the fresh connection over the online platform?
Yeah, well, I think it's so that's going back to virtual teams essentially, because people when they play the fresh connection, a lot of it is of course done face to face. But we have had, even before Corona, we have had experience with virtual teams. For example, MIT did a study where MIT had members who lived in different areas play together the fresh connection for a certain number of rounds, and then they compare their performance to face when they were sitting together. So, like I said, I think the biggest issue is getting organized. So, if you're playing in a team, you just sit together and play. But if you are discussing it via Zoom or Teams, then you need to schedule it better. Sometimes technical difficulties occur, so it just takes a little bit longer to complete the round. But with screen sharing and things like that, it doesn't really influence the quality of delivery.
Also, if I can briefly comment on that, so what we usually see how professors organize it is that they do the kickoff together with all students. They sometimes even record the kickoff or use the recording that we provide, so that students can also have a look at it afterwards. And then they leave the students to themselves. They give them a deadline a few days later to complete the first round, and then they can organize themselves as a team. So they usually play in teams, and then them as a team can then they say, okay, I have time tomorrow. They organize themselves. They play the first round until a certain day, and then on that day, the professor again holds a webinar with all students together, where he gives feedback. Maybe you could ask one team to present their strategy and then comment on that, or give some insights into the results of some teams to give a feedback loop to all students. And then the same again for the next coming days. So they again can play the second round in their own time and their own pace, and then get a debrief once they're all done. And that's quite nice because that's, as Kirill mentioned, it's really combining synchronous and asynchronous ways of working. Of course, working online for students is a bit more inefficient, but we have made experiences with this before, and since the game is itself, it's a web-based tool, it works quite well. So just to give you an idea into how professors organize it usually, or that's one idea, but there's many ways you can do it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. If anything else from anybody, anything we can answer, or any comments, or if anybody wants to share their experience. All right, then. Well, always feel free to reach out to Noah or myself, and we'll share the recording with you in the next couple of days. And if you need anything, want to learn more, please feel free to reach out. And I hope to speak to you soon.
Krill, I got a question. Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I just saw like you guys have revamped your Cool Connection. Like, is it like a new version or what is it?
Both. So there'll be it's still I think there'll be a bigger announcement sooner. But yeah, so there's more topics there. So for example, IBP is going to be in place, and there's also will be a redesign of the interface. So we'll be relaunching it essentially in the next couple of months.
Yeah, because I was amazed by when you said like it's like working capital plus IBP, because I work in my company on IBP SAP, and I was just thinking how you guys incorporated in that simulation. Really want to see.
Yeah, I think we ourselves will be seeing it very soon as well. But indeed, the focus has switched to really, instead of supply chain finance, to IBP and of course working capital management.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah.
But I think you will definitely hear about it very soon from one of us.
Probably doing any Discover Week or something.
Yeah, potentially. So I think if you just keep an eye on the LinkedIn, I'm sure in the next just before the summer there'll be some news on that.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, I have to discuss that with you later on once it's ready, and show you.
Well, thank you everybody. Enjoy evening or night for you, Aksan, especially.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right, then. Well, hope to speak to you soon.
Yes, thanks everyone. Thanks for
Bye
joining.
bye.
Sure. Have a good night and a day. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank
Bye bye.
you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thanks.
Bye, Sana.